Let's see. Hi, Anita. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, guys. How's everybody doing? Can you hear me and see me okay? Is everything good before we get started? Awesome, awesome. Looks like we got a couple of people on here. Fantastic. How's everybody's Friday going so far? It is Friday, right? Yeah, it's Friday.
Yeah, it is. It's Friday.
Fantastic. All right, we will start in just a minute. I just want to make sure everything was working good, and we will go ahead and get started.
Doris is there.
Hi, Doris. Let's see, I'm going to set this up here. If I can set it up here. Perfect. All right. Let's see. So I'm preheating my Isomalt before we get started. So I'm just popping it in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals, which is when my microwave is yelling at me. So I'm just going to check on it here. That looks great. Put it in for a little while longer since it'll be a minute till we start. Awesome. Tammy, I promise not to tell your boss that you're because you're at work. That's so funny.
Dad wants to know if you're driving, Tammy.
Awesome.
So do you want the air a little lower?
If you want to make it a little bit lower, that wouldn't be too bad, but it feels pretty good in here.
All right. NASA would like to know, what do you want to attend today? I'm assuming, what are you doing today?
Yeah, I think we are, yeah, there we go. So we're going to be doing our panoramic egg, our peacock egg. So here is our display piece here. I'm going to be showing you how to make the egg. So it is going to be cast Isomalt, and then we're also going to be pulling the little feet on the bottom to make it like that Fabergé egg style and stand the egg up. So that's what we're going to be doing today.
Doris says it sounds good, looks good.
Awesome.
Sandy loves the new space.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm in my new studio today. I am so excited. I think this is the first live stream I've done from here. But yeah, I'm in my new studio space, which has been working awesome. So I'm very excited. Still kind of working everything out with lighting and everything, so bear with me. But so far, so good. Connection's been pretty good so far. So
Jane says hi. It's Friday evening in the UK.
Hi, Jane.
And
Let's see. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Sandy. Fantastic. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. Like I said, we're going to be making the peacock panoramic egg because it is getting closer to Easter. I cannot even believe that Easter is not too far away. So I thought to prepare, I would do a little Easter-themed live stream for you guys of how to make the panoramic egg with the peacock in it. Now, of course, we're using my peacock mold from simicakes.com for this, but you can use any mold that you want as kind of the focal point because, you know, the panoramic egg and like Fabergé egg style displays, there's so many different ways that you can go with those and different ways you can decorate them. So you're welcome to use any molds or hand sculpted pieces that you want as your focal point in the middle, but I am going to be using that beautiful peacock. I just think that it looks perfect there with the tail trailing down. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be using. And we're going to be using Simi Isomalt today as always. So Simi Isomalt is my pre-cooked, ready to use Isomalt. So it's basically just all going to be ready to go. It's already been cooked and tempered, so you don't have to worry about recipes or temperatures or anything like that. You just melt it down in the microwave for about 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid. So it makes it super easy. Let me quiet my microwave. It makes it super duper easy so that all you have to do is melt it. So if you've seen Isomalt in the raw form, which is a powder, you do have to cook and temper that to a specific recipe in order to turn it into the hard candy and for the texture to work properly for you. It's kind of like tempering chocolate, but luckily once it's in the hard candy form, you don't have to retemper it. You can just use it as is over and over, and there's no waste because you can just reheat any excess, which is really nice. So yeah, this has already been pre-cooked. If you're interested in learning more about how I cook my Isomalt, my recipe is listed for free on my website, so you're welcome to check that out. But we're just starting with the tiles and then popping them in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid. Okay, so I'm going to set this off to the side. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera down so that you can see my work surface. If you guys have any questions throughout the entire demonstration, as always, you are more than welcome to write them in the chat. I have my mom, Michelle, here, and she's going to be reading the questions as they come in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them there, and I would be happy to answer them. So I'm just going to switch down here.
So
all right.
You have another example too, don't you?
What's that?
You have another example
of
if they don't want to use the peacock?
I do. I have another one that I will grab in a minute here, but I'll hold this one up here. So this is a little bit up close of the peacock inside the panoramic egg. And then I will show you the other example that I have. I made an alternate design with this same look. Let me see if I can find it here. I don't know if I can get to it right now, but I'll see if I can get to it in a minute. I don't want to knock anything over in the middle. So basically I have, you can replace the peacock with different molds. You can use different, hand sculpted designs if you prefer. It's up to you, but that is totally kind of your creativity and what you would like to put in. So basically, I'm going to be showing you how to kind of bend the peacock mold and shape it into the shape that we want, but I have another one that I did a Texas theme, so I have a Texas boot in the middle. You can hand sculpt something like flowers or another animal or really anything that you wanted to. You could put, different painting designs or icing images in the middle. There's lots of different ways you can customize this. I just wanted to do something nice and kind of bold and classic with that pretty royal blue and the gold, so that is what I'm going to be showing today. Alright, so I'm going to put that off to the side, but we're going to be starting off by pouring our egg, because we kind of need that for everything else that we're going to build on top of it, so we're going to use our egg mold. Now, my egg mold, I like to cut it into pieces, so this is just my personal preference. I find it easier to work with when you cut it up, so I have, I think, 5 or 6 different sections here that I just cut up. They were originally one piece, but I like to work with them one by one. I just find that I have more control that way, and it's a little bit easier, so that's what I'm going to do, but that's totally personal preference. You don't have to do that step if you don't want to, but basically we're just going to be pouring our egg section. So this egg is really interesting because it's going to be a more of a panoramic egg where the edges of the egg curve inwards slightly. So when you pour it, I'll show you kind of what I mean because I'm going to pour 2 of them. You could make this so that if you're making like maybe a tea bomb or a chocolate bomb, you could put the 2 halves together. But with this one, they do curl inwards, so they're not going to sit flush together in the shape of an egg by itself. But you can customize that. You can trim some of it down and make them fit perfectly together, which will make more sense when I have them out. So I'm going to make them first, and then I'll talk more about putting them together if you wanted 2 halves. But this is going to be perfect for our design because it actually has that kind of inward curl towards the top that's going to be exactly like a real panoramic egg display. So I'm going to make 2 of them here just to have a spare, and I'm going to be using my blue. So if you are coloring the Isomalt yourself, you can use a couple different kinds of color. You can either use an airbrush color, which is going to be a water or alcohol-based color, or you can use a petal dust or luster dust, a powdered color, and that is going to give you more of an opaque effect. The one thing you never want to use is gel colors. You don't want to mix gel colors into Isomalt because it can affect the texture of it and it won't allow it to dry properly. So liquid or powder is best, and I'm just going to be melting that down in the microwave like I said. Mine got a little thick while I was talking, so I just popped it back in for another 30 seconds, and that will just kind of melt it all down and get it to a nice boil. And that's when I would add my color. If you got the accessory kit that went with this project, it'll be already colored for you, so this is a nice dark blue, but you definitely can color it yourself if you prefer. And you can also add oil-based flavors into this at this point as well, so it doesn't take very much, just a little bit of the oil-based flavor. Those work the best to flavor the Isomalt. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pour these. You want to make sure if you bring your Isomalt to a boil that you let it settle before you pour. So if you let it settle, that is going to just get all of the air out. It's going to let it cool off a little bit. So basically when you first melt the Isomalt, it's going to be boiling and bubbling. That's awesome because any air that was mixed into the crystal clear Isomalt from melting down and getting little air pockets, they'll all rise and pop themselves and it'll boil itself out. If you pour it while it's actively boiling, you're just pouring those bubbles into the piece, right? So we want to go ahead, let this cool at room temperature for a couple minutes until it stops boiling and bubbling. You can see there's just 1 or 2 bubbles that have been popping. That's good, that's settling, and that way when we go to pour it, it'll be crystal clear and there's not going to be any air in it. So I just let that settle till it stops boiling. A couple stray bubbles attached to the bowl or on the surface are fine as long as they're just sitting there and they're not actively boiling or moving or popping, then it's ready to use.
This is my favorite shape for those marshmallow eggs with the chocolate.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that would work so perfect for this.
Because you can coat these the same with chocolate as you're going to do with Isomalt.
Definitely, yeah. You can create shells out of these out of chocolate the exact same way. You can also use the gelatin if you wanted to, or anything else pretty much that you can pour. You can make into different designs with the egg. Alright, so I'm going to start with one, just to begin, and we're going to make a shell with this, an eggshell, imagine that, and we're going to do that by filling it up solid first, and then we're going to drain it out. So that will give us a nice even coat. I'm just going to fill this all the way up to the top, So I'm filling it up to the very, very top edge, and then immediately after I'm going to drain it out. So I'm going to very carefully pour it back out, so because remember that Isomalt is quite hot. It's about 300 degrees, so it's going to be very, very crucial that you protect your hands. I do recommend wearing gloves for this. Okay, I've been doing this for so many years, my hands don't feel heat anymore, so it's easier for me to show you guys in more detail without them. But basically, I'm just letting all of the excess drain out. You don't have to wait in between filling and then pouring it back out, because the silicone of the mold is so much cooler than the Isomalt. As soon as it touches it, it's going to start cooling, so you don't have to worry about waiting, but you do want to make sure that you drain all of the excess out. Now I'm using just the blue right out of the container, and that is going to give you a nice crystal clear blue that's going to be really, really bright and very pretty and transparent. But another kind of thing that you can do with this to make it pop a little bit more is to actually add in a powdered color. So I'm going to be doing a mixture of the airbrush color that I had used before to color this. Then you can add in a little bit of pearl dust or white petal dust. That will actually make your color a little bit more opaque and give you kind of just a different effect. So you can see I have that blue in there. I'm going to do one more coat for this one just because I want it to be nice and strong since we are going to be adding things on. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this up one more time. And then I'm going to mix in some powdered color, and that way I have one of each to show you guys the difference and what it's going to look like. So again, I didn't have to wait, I just immediately filled it back up. And then I want to make sure that all of the excess is drained out before I flip it back over. Now for this specific technique, you don't necessarily have to wait for all the excess to drain because it has a little bit of a flatter bottom. So what you can do is if you actually don't let it drain all the way and there's still a little bit of excess that's pouring out, if it pools at the bottom, that will actually strengthen and thicken the base so that when we're adding pieces onto it, it will help just to make it stronger. So what I'm going to do is actually not drain it all out, and I'm going to let the little bit of excess, you'll start to see the edges darken, how they're sinking down. I'm going to let all of that excess just pool at the bottom, and that is going to give me a little bit of a stronger base. And I'll set that down and let that cool. If it kind of cools unevenly, like you can see there's kind of a line here where it's slowly seeping in. If it doesn't reach all the way and it doesn't just balance and flatten itself out, you can lightly zap that with the torch. Another thing you could do is actually just add a little bit of extra Isomalt into the back of the egg. You don't want to add a ton, but you definitely could add a little bit and just kind of move it around. And then I'll use the torch to balance that out a little bit and just blend the edges in. So if you did drain it too much and you wanted to add some back in, you absolutely can do that because you can see it just flattened itself out. And you can't even really tell, but it's just going to be that little bit of thickness at the base that's really going to help it be nice and strong. Now this excess will just break off when it's cool, but we can also remove it in just a minute so that you can see the difference of it. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of pearl dust into, so I'm just using the Sugar Art Sterling Pearl Luster Dust into my blue because I want to show you the difference when they come out of how they're going to look. So I'm just going to scoop a little bit in here, and depending on how much you add, of course, will make it more or less intense. I put maybe half of a teaspoon or so into this bowl of Isomalt, and I'm just going to stir that in thoroughly. Alright, and you'll see it gets nice and shimmery, and it has that beautiful pearlization happening. Alright, that's going to be awesome. So it has that more metallic finish now. It's going to be more opaque, and this is just going to help the gold to pop a little bit more. So it's a little bit more intense, a little bit more bold, and you'll really see the difference once the two pieces come out. So I'm going to make the egg the exact same way with my other mold. So I'm going to fill it all the way up.
Sophia says, nice new set.
Thank you! I am really enjoying it so far. Okay, so I just poured that in. I know it's a little bit hard to see right now with the reflection. I promise I'm getting that all worked out. But you can kind of see how it's a little bit more shimmery.
I think you can tell.
You can still tell? Okay, good.
Oh yeah, it looks really beautiful.
Alright, and then I'm just draining all of that excess out.
Now, I'm freezing a little bit. Is anybody else getting any freezing on their picture?
Oh, yeah, let me know if you see any freezing or buffering or anything.
It may take a minute.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag. Okay, so I poured that first layer. You can already see how much more that's reflecting the light, which is really pretty.
Oh, that's amazing.
One more layer. And then drain that out.
Sophia says no freezing and a beautiful shine.
Okay, good. We have a lot of devices going on in the on the Wi-Fi here, so it may just be us. All right, so I'm just draining this out. Remember, I don't have to drain it completely. If I want a little bit more strength to the base of the egg, I'm going to leave it. Okay, I have some little drips here. The ones that are cool, always use a tool or a toothpick to make sure that they're cool first before you pick them up, but you can throw those back in the bowl and reuse them. And then these little bits of excess, after a couple minutes, they should be cool enough that they're just going to peel away. You can use your tool or toothpick for this, so that just in case they were too hot for your fingers, you want to make sure that you protect them. And they'll come off after it's cool too, but I like to take them off when they're a little warm because they come off easier that way, and it doesn't risk cracking anything, since the slightly pliable Isomalt is less likely to crack than cool Isomalt. So the earlier I can do it, the better.
I can't imagine keeping the whole mold together. Doing this, keeping the whole mat together.
Exactly, yeah, that's why I cut this apart. I like to do these individually to have a lot more control over it. Having them all in one is just a little bit too daunting to me to have to worry about other ones while I'm making others or do them all at once, so I just prefer to, but of course it's personal preference.
I think it'd be easier with the chocolate.
Yeah, definitely would be, since it doesn't have that burn factor. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and let those cool. This one, the excess is not quite cool enough to come up. It was not releasing easily. So I'll wait like one more minute while I'm heating up some of my gold for that to finish cooling. So those are going to take probably about, I would say maybe 15 minutes or so at room temperature to cool down all the way until you can take them out. But of course it depends on your environment and how cool or warm your room is. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop my gold in. I had preheated it so you can see it's slightly liquid, but it's really not liquid enough to do anything with. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that in for another 30 seconds or so for our next step. Okay, so this should be cool enough. Just about. See how I just pulled away? And then any of those little strings are a little bit easier to clean up at the end. So I will just let those cool. Alright, everybody doing good? Any questions? Letting those pieces cool. Alright, so next what we're going to do is we are going to be making the feet for the egg, because we don't want to pour our big molds yet. So this is the peacock mold, and then the other mold, the bejeweled kind of mold that we're going to use for the top. We don't want to pour these yet because we want to bend them to the shape of the egg, and the egg needs to kind of be put together before we can do that, right? And it needs to be cool. So we're going to wait on those, and we're going to pull in the meantime. I'm going to grab another silicone mat, because I like to pull on these slightly thinner silicone baking mats rather than pulling on my Silpat mat. I find that it just releases a little bit easier, and it moves around easier. It doesn't have that texture that Silpat mats have, so I just like to work on that. But I am going to leave the Silpat mat underneath it because it buffers the heat from my table a little bit, and Isomalt has pores just like skin. If they get too hot by insulating so much heat when I pour the Isomalt out on the mat, if it gets too hot, it can actually stick and not want to release from the Isomalt when it's ready, like it should. So what I do is I just buffer the heat, especially because I'm working on a metal tabletop, but most tabletops that aren't stone I find do this, so I just like to have that double mat as an extra layer of protection so that it doesn't heat up or insulate as much. And then I also, you'll see me moving the mat around a lot just to move it to cool spots. If you do ever get a stuck spot, you will see, because it just will not come up no matter how cool it is. That's totally fine. You can remove all the excess Isomalt to use, and then you can go ahead and just rinse off the stuck spot in cool water, and it will literally just jump off. So really, really easy to clean up if that happens, and you can still use all your extra Isomalt, but sometimes that can happen, so just kind of be careful of having any too hot spots or anything like that. But basically we're just going to start pulling the Isomalt, so I'm going to take the gold. Now this has the gold luster dust mixed in, okay, so whether you got it pre-colored or if you colored it yourself, it has that beautiful realistic metallic finish. I'm going to pour this out. Okay. I'm going to do more than I need because it will hold more heat the more I have there. And then I'm going to start cooling this down. So I'm going to fold in all of the cool air and start to thicken it. Okay. so I'm just going to fold in opposite directions. And now I'm not going to use a heat lamp for this. When I am done, a lot of times I'll put this underneath my heat lamp, but I'm not going to use that for this because I want to go ahead and show you how to do it if you don't have a heat lamp, so it's more accessible. If you had a heat lamp, that's awesome, but if not, I'm going to show you how to keep reheating this. It's super easy. But basically what our goal is right now is to just cool this down. So I'm folding it in opposite directions, which is just folding in cool air. I am paying attention to the edges of the puddle, so this edge is going to line up with the opposite edge, so I'm not stopping before it, and I'm not going past it when I fold it in half. I'm trying to line up the edges so that it doesn't get too spread out. You'll see the edges are starting to pull away a little bit. I'm also going to move over, because remember that table is getting very warm. Alright, if you want a more in-depth, kind of detailed information about pulling, I have a whole video on my YouTube channel of Isomalt Basics, so you are welcome to check that out for a little bit more in-depth kind of showing what everything is doing and, you know, just some, like, different, you know, frequently asked questions and stuff like that, but basically we're just folding and folding until this is going to start releasing. So now you can see it is coming together into more of a clay. It's not really a liquid anymore, so I can go a little faster. You don't want to go fast at first because when it's liquid you don't want to splatter it anywhere when it's boiling hot. But when it's thicker you do want to go a little quicker because it will release easier. So I'm just still folding it edge to edge, but I'm peeling it back a little bit faster, and that's going to help it to release. Alright, so I'm just doing that until it releases from the mat, so you can see that it is not sticking anymore like it was. It's still quite hot and soft though, so it's not going to hold any shape I sculpt into it. I am going to go ahead and pull this a little, which is essentially the same thing we were just doing on the mat. We're folding in more cool air to get it a little bit more cooled and firm, and just the texture to hold its shape better when we go to sculpt. So I'm just stretching and folding directly in half. I'm not twisting this up, I'm not kneading it, I'm folding it in the same direction every time because you will see those streaks and striations of air that you're folding in. In the finished piece, that's just the look of pulled sugar, so you want to make sure that it's going to be nice and straight and smooth.
Sophia said she definitely wants the peacock mold for her store next time.
Ooh, awesome. I love this peacock mold.
I know. Sophia, please post your shop in the comments.
Yes.
Sophia owns the shop in Portugal. Anybody
Yes.
who is located in Europe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you can see it's holding its shape a little bit better now. It's not just immediately turning back into a blob. It has a little bit more kind of structure to it, but it is still quite soft and pliable. So I'm going to go ahead and start making my different pieces with it. So I'm just going to grab a sculpting tool here. I'm going to use my silicone sculpting tools as well as a little baby palette knife. You can see I've torched on this one a lot. It is clean, but it just has some little torch marks because that's my Isomalt palette knife. And we're going to go ahead and make some feet. So I'm going to use one of these molds as a kind of diagram for the size because I don't want to accidentally touch it to the Isomalt in the mold that's cooling because it will stick permanently. So I'm just going to use that as a size guide, or you can make the eggs in advance, of course, and then use those as a size guide. But basically we're just going to make some little teardrop shapes. So at this point you could put it under the lamp and just cut off as much as you need, but since we're not working with the lamp today, I'll just reheat the excess as needed. When you fold it in half, you're going to have the side that has all the wrinkles in it, and then you're going to have the smooth side. The smooth side is always where you want to cut, so you have a nice smooth finished piece. You can make these, of course, as big or small as you want, but I'm just going to make kind of maybe like half of a gumball size. And then I'm going to start kind of rolling and pinching and twisting to create a teardrop shape to create one of the feet. Okay, so you see how it's bigger on one side and then smaller. And I'm going to curl this upwards and then create kind of the flat of the foot at the base. So I'm going to push that down on a flat surface. Okay, holding it up to my size guide here. And then I like to put some little toes on it because I feel like it gives it more of like a claw foot look. So I'm going to press in from the side of the teardrop with my baby palette knife. And I'm going around to the bottom too because that'll give you a more realistic look, as well as just putting the lines in the top. So I'm kind of going all the way around to create the little lines. Okay, and then I'm also going to just pinch it slightly at the where kind of the ankle would be, just to add some form of structure and support to it. Okay, and again, just sizing it to make sure it's going to fit okay. That looks good, making sure it's going to sit flat okay. Perfect. So that's kind of the shape that I have going right now. All right, and then I'm going to cool that in place. If you don't have a little fan, you can just let it cool at room temperature, but I like my little battery operated fan so that it cools a little bit faster and I don't have to sit here and hold it for as long. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate it in front of the fan and let it cool for a minute or two so that I know when I set it down, it's not going to flatten or misshape while I'm not looking. And we're going to go ahead and make 3 of these. So these are going to be the feet. We're going to do 3 like a tripod so that it kind of holds itself up. You could do 4 if you wanted to, but I find for the weight of this, it's not very heavy. So we're going to go ahead and do 3. All right. So there's our first one. And then we should have enough warmth. I didn't pull this too much to cool it down too much so that I still had a little bit of extra warmth. Okay, and I'm trying to get them the same size. That'll be the trick here. I'm just kind of pulling and stretching and then lightly rolling. The key with pulled Isomalt is to kind of get your finished pieces with as little amount of tweaking and touching as possible, because the more you touch it and work with it, the more it's cooling down, so you don't want to take too long. But of course that just comes with practice. So I'm going to try and get them about the same size. I'm going to flatten the bottom, then add my little toes. One up here. So just adding in the little toes on there, and then reshaping as needed. Okay, so now you want to make sure that you do opposite feet, right? Because they're going to go on either side. You don't want him walking in circles. So we're going to put these on opposite sides, so we want them to be curving in opposite directions, but we do want them to look like they match. Now we're making 3 of these, so the trick is when you go to put them on, you pick the 2 that look the most similar to be the front ones, because you're not really going to see the back one. It's more so for support. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of use my mold as a size here. That looks like it'll be perfect, and then I'll cool this one down just so that it is going to keep it in place. And just harden it into shape before we make the last and final one. We are going to have to reheat our excess Isomalt now because it's gotten a little bit too hard to work with, so I'm going to show you guys how I do that. If you weren't working with the heat lamp that I use is a 250 watt bulb, so it's quite hot. I do have a YouTube video on how I build it and the exact heights and everything that I use, but I usually just clip it to my PVC stand that I designed, but you can also clip it to your overhead cabinet if you're working on your countertop. But for small things like this, it really isn't that necessary, because we're going to only need one more little piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of Isomalt, I'm going to move all of my extra pieces here so that I can grab the mat. Okay, I'm going to take the Isomalt and fold it into the silicone mat, and then I'm going to go ahead and put that in the microwave. So I'm going to put it in the microwave for only 5-second intervals. You don't want to do too much. We're not trying to melt this back down to a liquid. We're just trying to reanimate it and soften it a little bit, and so that's why we don't want to do too much. Now you do have to be careful because the microwave is naturally just going to heat unevenly. It's not going to all be the same temperature. The center is probably going to get a lot warmer, so you want to make sure that you are being careful and that you don't get too liquidy spots and that you stick your finger in when you take it out. So I just did about 2 5-second intervals, and that seems to be enough for me. Okay, so you can see that some spots are more liquid, some spots are holding their shape better, and I'm just going to fold it more, just like we did originally, to cool this off into the clay until it's ready to come up again. And then your Isomalt will be reanimated and ready to work with, and you can do that as many times as you need to throughout making your pieces. So if you don't have the heat lamp, you definitely can still do pulled Isomalt. You'll just have to reheat a little bit more frequently rather than having all of the extra pulled Isomalt just ready to go and kept warm. So now I can see it's not sticking. I'm going to stretch and fold a little bit just to balance the temperature back out. Alright, that should be perfect. And now we'll make our last foot, and then by then our molds should be cool enough to take out, and we can start pouring our decorations. Alright, so one more. Okay. Stretch that out into our teardrop shape. Kind of rolling it to cool it down a little bit, creating that flat spot for the bottom of the foot, curling it up, And then I'll use our little palette knife to create the toes for the claw feet. Okay.
Super cute.
This one's a little bit smaller than the other ones, but it should be fine because, again, that's the back one, so I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to go ahead and let that cool. Alright, and then our excess Isomalt, of course, you could keep working with it if you had other decorations you wanted to pull or sculpt, or we can just throw it back into the silicone bowl and remelt it down to a liquid so that it's going to be ready to pour for our next decoration. So I'm just going to throw mine into the bowl, and then I'm going to pop that into the microwave for about 30 to maybe 45 more seconds. It depends on the strength of your microwave too. I went for a cute microwave, a smaller microwave for my filming area, so it's not as strong, and I usually have to heat it for longer, but that's fine with me. If you have a more industrial or commercial microwave, you obviously won't have to heat it quite as long. It just depends on the strength. Alright. Perfect. So we have our 3 little feet here. Put those off to the side. I can switch back to my nice white mat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my molds ready now. So I have my Peacock silicone mold here that we're going to be using for our focal point, and then we have this beautiful brooch. It kind of has that like downward tilting, almost like vines with the leaves on them, which I think is going to be perfect for the top of our egg. So we're going to pour both of those with the liquid Isomalt. Check on my Isomalt here. It's almost there. Since I had that piece of pulled Isomalt in there, it just kind of has to take its time to equally melt down. Alright, and then we'll pour it into the mold. You can use toothpicks or skewers to spread it into the mold's crevices. I'm going to use my silicone tool here, and that's just going to make it so that it's reusable. It's a little bit easier to grab, but you could definitely use any kind of toothpick or skewer. There we go. Alright, so I brought my Isomalt to a boil, so you see how it is boiling and bubbling. That's awesome. Remember, we don't want to pour that right away, so we're going to go ahead and let that cool for just a few minutes or a few seconds at room temperature until it stops boiling and bubbling. So I see all the bubbles rising. I see them popping. Now, if we were working with a transparent color like we were originally with the blue, that is very important to bring it to a nice rolling boil and then to let it settle before we pour. The gold is an opaque color, so you're not going to see the bubbles inside if there were any, so it's really not as big of a deal, but we do want to make sure that we're not pouring it while it's boiling, just because it's going to be very hot, and we want it to come out of the mold a little bit easier, so we don't want it to be too piping hot. So I'm just going to wait, practice my patience, and I can see it's really slowing down now. The bubbles aren't popping as furiously as they were originally. You don't want to ever stir your Isomalt unless you have to. So if you have to mix in color or flavor, of course you have to stir it, but you always bring it back to a boil after that to help everything emulsify and to bring out all of that hot air, because hot air rises, right? So when you put it back in the microwave, it'll come back to a boil.
No tapping, right?
Yeah, you don't want to tap it like chocolate. For one, it's too thick, so it's really not going to do anything like chocolate will, but it's also boiling hot, so you don't want to tap it onto you by accident. Very important. Alright, that's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and pour it into my mold, so we'll start out with a little brooch. I don't worry about filling the entire thing up because I can use my tool to help spread it. For things that have little cracks and crevices, sometimes you don't want to risk overflowing it by pouring too much, so I like to just push it into all the details with my tool. And then I'll let that cool, so I'm not worrying about rough edges, or if I did overflow it a little bit, it's fine because we can clean all that up. So I'll go ahead and put that off to the side. And then we'll do our peacock. This one has a little bit more cracks and crevices than the other one, so we'll really take our time with the tool and spread it in. Okay. And you can also add more if you didn't pour enough, or you can scoop and drip some with the tool. I'm just really going to make sure that it's all spread in. And then we'll clean it up later if I have any little overflows from spreading it. Perfect. So if we were going to let these cool, they're different sizes and depths, so they're not going to take exactly the same amount of time. The small one to cool completely down would probably take about 10 minutes or so at most. The big one would probably take more like 15 or 20 minutes, but we don't want these to cool completely, right? We want to kind of bend them and shape them to our egg, especially the peacock is going to take a lot of bending and shaping. So we want to take these out a little early, probably at about 10 minutes or so for the big one, and maybe like 5 to 7 minutes for the smaller one. The smaller one doesn't have to be quite as contoured. It's going to be still relatively flat, but we're going to put these off to the side, but not forget about them. Okay, and then we will attach those on after the egg is put together, which is what we're going to do in the meantime. Okay. So I'm going to grab my eggs. Always check to see if they're cool with a clean tool first, not your finger, just in case they weren't. And then we're just going to lightly kind of pull at the edges of the mold first to get the suction kind of taken away throughout. Alright.
Do you have to do that same step with chocolate?
Yes, you do the same step with chocolate. Oh, I got a little crack in the edge, but that's okay. Okay, I could torch that little piece back on if I needed to, or you can cover it. Our peacock would probably cover that anyway, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. This is the transparent egg, so you see how see-through it is. The back does have some bubbles on it, just because silicone naturally has a little bit of more of a matte kind of look to it. If this was solid, you could torch those away, but if it is hollow like this, you don't want to take the torch to it if you don't have to, because we don't want to melt through it. So that is kind of the look of the cast Isomalt. And then we're going to do look at the one with the pearl dust in it, which is going to be more opaque.
Oh, this is so funny.
What's that?
Can you see this egg? It has a happy face.
Which one? Oh my gosh, it does! Look at that! Oh, that's so funny.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Alright, so this is the one that had the dust in it. I'm gonna just take my time with it.
No rushing.
Yep, no rushing with this. And you see how it's a little bit more opaque, it's not as see-through, and so that, in my opinion, is going to make it pop a little bit better and just make it more intense when we put the pieces inside of it. But of course you could do either. If you wanted that transparent look, it would be very, very pretty. Okay, we'll put a little smiley face over here.
That's so cute.
Okay, so now we're going to attach on our feet. So what I was talking about before is putting it together. So if you look at the two halves, when I poured them to the edge, you see how there's an indent on the top and bottom. There's like a V shape up here and at the other side. Obviously that doesn't really look like a realistic egg, right? It's because it curves inwards. So what you would do is if you wanted them to match up perfectly to look like one egg, is you want to melt off some of the sides. So what I would do is take an electric griddle, heat it up to about 200 to 250 degrees. You can push these down on it and melt away some of the sides and then put those together. So if you melted away about 1/4 of an inch or so on both, they're going to meet up better. So you kind of would melt to like the highest point on both of them, and then they would stick together perfectly. But for this, we're just using half of it, so we're not going to worry about that. You could do that anyway and just melt away a little bit to clean up the edge if it was really rough. I don't find that these come out really that rough, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can see the silicone did a really good job at making it perfect.
I think it'd be pretty impressed sugar too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be very pretty impressed sugar. That's kind of the traditional way to do it, right? Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and attach our feet. Okay, so I'm going to, you can put them straight out to the side or you can angle them up a little bit. I'm not going to have them straight out in front of him, but I'm not going to have them going opposite ways either. I'm going to have them kind of at an angle. Okay, so we're just going to torch to stick these on. So I'm going to torch very lightly on the egg. I'm not torching at the egg, I'm torching up against it, so I'm just brushing the heat up against it, and then I'm mostly torching on the foot. The egg is going to be very fragile and we don't want it to accidentally melt, but we do want it to be warm because warm to warm sticks better than warm to cool. Then I'm going to hold both feet up as if I was attaching both feet, but I'm only going to do one. This is just for kind of placement. Okay. I'm gonna cool that down slightly to hold it in place. And if you don't heat enough, it's not going to stick, so you'll know if it's not enough if it just pops off. Like I said, the majority of the heating was on the foot. Okay, I don't need to get it perfect because I still want it a little flexible for when we put the next foot on, just so that I have some wiggle room. I'm going to try and get these pointing in the same directions and look even, and then I'm going to stand it up before it's too cool so that I can see if I need to adjust it at all. That looks about good. I'll let those cool. And then we'll put the back one on. So I am putting the feet lower than the bottom of the egg. The egg itself is not going to be sitting down on the table. If this was something heavier, you definitely could sit the bottom of the egg on the table and just have the feet there as an illusion. But since this is pretty lightweight, we're going to boost it up. Plus it'll boost up the peacock a little bit. Okay, so just making sure as it cools. Good. Oh, and I popped them back off. So see, I just did that to show you guys. If you don't heat them enough, it'll come off. So we're just gonna
I guess it's better than heating too much.
Yeah, heating too little is definitely better than heating too much. Okay, so let's go ahead and put one at a time. And the edges of the eggs are a little bit delicate too, so that's not abnormal for the edges to crack, but luckily we're going to cover all of it. There we go. All better. That's the beauty of Isomalt, is that everything goes back together as long as you still have the pieces and it's not totally shattered. And then we can always cover it up if we needed to. Okay, so cooling that back down. And then we'll attach on the back one once that is nice and cool and solid, so I know it's not going to move around on me. Okay, still keeping an eye on our molds that are cooling, but they shouldn't be cool yet. At least the peacock is still going to be kind of too soft and pliable to attach on. Alright. Just about there. We'll hold this up and kind of see where our back foot is going to go, so carefully. Okay, and then I'm just going to, again, lightly torch on the back of the egg, and then mostly torch on the back of the foot. And kind of use it like a kickstand and allow the egg to sit back on it. I'll let that cool, kind of letting the pressure of the egg push back onto it and allow it to attach.
Super cute. I love the toes.
The toes are my favorite part too. Okay, peacock is almost ready. The top decoration is ready, so we'll be able to put that on in a second. I just want to make sure that's nice and secure. Carefully set my egg off to the side. Okay, that's what we have so far. You can see with his little feet on there. Alright. So now I'm going to take this piece out. It's still a little bit warm, so I can bend it if needed, but I do have some rough edges on the sides. You can see them kind of overflowing. So I'm going to put this face down on my mat and then lightly torch the edges to just kind of smooth them over. It'll melt into itself and just smooth itself over. If you had a really big spill or anything, you could definitely take your scissors now and cut that off while it's still a little bit warm. I wait about 10 seconds after you torch it to pick it up or to do anything to it just in case. But you see how that just smoothed out all those edges. And now you can see it's not like a super bright reflective gold yet. We are going to paint on top of it just to make it a little bit brighter, but that's one of my tricks that I will show you later. And then we're going to attach that onto the egg while the peacock is cooling. It's almost there. I'm going to put my fan on it just to speed it up a little bit for demo's sake. Okay, and I'm going to put this right at the top edge. Leaving enough room for the peacock, of course. Okay. So I'm going to cool that and then I'll hold it up to show you. See how gentle I'm being now? Okay, so that's what we got so far. So that is really a good kind of canvas to put any sort of decoration into the middle of it. Like I said, you could do flowers, you could do a different animal, you could do a scene, you could do an icing image and then layer, you know, different like a bas relief sort of style on top.
Oh, how pretty that would be.
Yeah, because scenes are really popular with this style of decoration, like little woodland scenes and things like that for spring. So that's definitely something that you could add into the middle of it if you wanted to. Okay, and then we're just waiting for our peacock to cool just a little bit more. We kind of want to get it in between where it's cool enough that it holds its shape and it's not just immediately melting or blobbing, but we want it warm enough to still be a little bit pliable. So I'm kind of trying to catch it right at that in between. Move that over and out of the way.
Gee, I don't know why.
There we go, so that should be good. Alright, so we're going to take this guy out. So we have our peacock here. I am going to torch those edges just lightly to smooth them over before we put him in. Okay. And then you can trim off parts of his tail if you need to, depending on how your design is going to go. I think I'm going to go ahead and trim off just these two right here so that they don't stick out too much. That's what I did on the original one. So I'm just trimming off. This is kind of like a bejeweled peacock, so it's not as vital for it to have, you know, every single feather. He's not going to be flying anywhere, so he'll be okay. There we go. So see how that just thinned out a little bit towards his body and made it more of a V shape at the top so that it's going to fit in between the legs a little easier. And I'll just kind of shape it a little before I put it on.
From the back, it looked like a camel.
A camel. That's so funny. Alright, and then I'm going to cool it before I attach it, or at least cool it a little so that I don't have to hold it on the egg. There we go. So I'm just holding it into the egg a little bit and then cooling it, letting it sort of prop itself up into the right shape. I don't want to cool it down completely because I still want some give to it in case I want to move it around. But I just want to cool it enough that I know it's not going to fall down once we put it in. So it's all about hurry up and wait with this. Wait for it to cool, then hurry up and shape it before it cools, and then wait for it to cool a little more. Alright. Good. So I'm just going to lightly heat on both pieces. Attach it on, and then let that cool down the rest of the way. And I'm using that as almost another foot at the bottom so that it holds it up and props it a little bit stronger.
Oh, a lot of support.
Yeah, it adds a lot of support. So I'm just having the tail cascade down the front and then letting his body cool upright. And then I'll hold that up before we do some painting on it after it cools down a little.
Beautiful.
That's what we have so far. Oh, it popped out. That seems to be the name of the game today. It must be dry here.
Our humidity is lower than it's been all winter. I think
Oh my
they
gosh.
said on the news.
So yeah, that's what it is. I'm used to all that stickiness. Alright, but I'll just lightly heat it and really, really torch him down to get him to stick.
But don't worry, it's supposed to pour all day tomorrow.
Oh good, our humidity will be restored. There we go. Alright. So I just really made sure that he was nice and stuck this time. I'm gonna torch, oh, I hit you guys a little bit. On here. Alright, so I just kind of reassembled him back on. And we'll let him cool a little bit more. And then we're going to paint over this. So like I said, I kind of have a trick to making everything pop because you can see the difference between that one and the finished one as far as just the intensity of the gold. So we're going to paint over top of the gold to get a little bit more of a reflective finish, and that's just going to help everything to pop a lot better, especially in photography, which is very important for you know, this kind of desserts and confections and cakes, because you want somebody to take a picture of it so they remember to order from you next time, right? So it's important that your pieces look good in person as well as in photography. So we want to go ahead and just make it a little bit more reflective. Isomalt, because it's naturally transparent, even if you add opacity in the Isomalt, it's still transparent. It absorbs the color, so we're going to give it something to reflect.
Shirley would like to know, what temperature is our room? I think her room must be too cool, because when she works with the Isomalt, it cools way too fast. I would never have that much time to bend things like that.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the temperature of your room is going to be a really big factor in it. Alright, so I'm just going to zap it a little bit more because his egg wants to pop off now. That lack of humidity is really throwing me, guys, but, you know, it's just to show you that you can really fix it as many times as it wants to come apart.
Yeah, I want to say something like, generally we're like 90%. Over in Orlando, they said it was going to be 30%.
Humidity?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure here.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot drier. Who would have thought? Because everybody always says that it's too hard to work with Isomalt in humidity, but I find it way easier. Everything sticks together better.
I think I have the air set on 73 here.
Ah, okay. Alright, there we go. So, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to set it off to the side while we get our paints ready. Okay. Stay. Okay. Don't try and fly away on me. Alright, so I'm going to grab a paper towel and go ahead and get my paints ready. So I'm going to use a mixture of gold and brown. So I'm using the gold luster dust, which is the same one that I mixed into the Isomalt, Wedding Gold from the Sugar Art. And I'm going to put that into a palette. I'm also going to use a little bit of brown petal dust. So this is deep brown. This is not a luster dust, this is a petal dust. But because we're going to be adding in the alcohol into it, it's going to paint on really nicely. So I'm going to gently let him sit here. Okay, so I'm going to mix in some alcohol into my gold. Okay. So just take on my palette a little bit of
And
gold.
what's the brown?
The brown is deep brown. I don't know if they still have deep brown because I've had this for a while, but they have chocolate brown, I know for sure, and that is a very good equivalent. You may have to add a little bit of black into it to get it a little darker if you want it darker, but it's a very pretty warm brown. Okay, and we're just going to paint over everything to make it pop more. So you already see how the lighting is changing when you look at it, right? On this section here, it's reflecting the light when you have that surface paint on it. Okay, and then we're going to add in a little bit of depth because I wanted this to not necessarily look old, but to have a slight antique-y sort of look to it, just so that it added some interest. Since this is just two colors, and it's just going to be very, you know, solid, simple designs, I wanted to just add a little bit of interest into it. So I'm just painting the entire gold pieces with the gold, and then I'll add in that little bit of shading and depth with the brown. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I just painted the entire thing. I'm not going to pick it up right now because it's wet, but you can see it down here on the tail section. And then what we're going to do with the dark brown is I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush, and I'm going to mix that with some alcohol. The more alcohol you add, the more transparent it will be. So if you want a darker color, don't add quite as much alcohol. If you want it lighter, then you can add more. I'm going to do a pretty good amount of alcohol so it's not too intense. And then I'm just going to go into the indents. So general shading rule is any indents are going to be darker, any high points are going to be lighter. So we just follow that and kind of go around each one of these gems. I'm going to go in between the little toes. And that's just going to help to antique it. You see how that just darkened it up a little bit? It adds some interest into your eye. And when you're working with really wet paint like this too, it's also going to settle naturally into the cracks and crevices, so that it'll kind of do your job for you if you just apply it in the general area and then let it settle where it wants to. That's why I like painting with dusts, because the pigment actually can separate sometimes from the alcohol, and I like that. I think that it works really well for natural shading effects. Alright, so just painting little bits around. We'll get a little bit in the brooch at the top. So I'm just doing kind of a quick painting just to show you guys the technique, but you can definitely be more precise with this. You can go in between each little individual piece. I do like to paint it after it's together because the paint can act as a barrier and not let things stick as easily. So it's just going to be easier to go ahead and paint it once it's all put together. And add some shading around his body, between his feet. There we go. All right. There we go. So you can already see that that's really just added a lot of interest. I'm going to take a little bit, whatever's left of that gold, and just lightly swipe it over the whole thing. I'm not poking at the piece with my brush. I'm letting the brush stay flat and just dragging it across the high points and letting it catch on all the high ridges. That'll bring some of the brightness back into it, but it won't paint over the indents. So I'm just kind of lightly sweeping my flat brush over everything to make sure that the high points are still bright and then the paint has settled into the dark grooves. And there we go. Okay, I'll let that dry for a minute. It's alcohol, so it shouldn't take very long. I generally use Everclear or I'll use vodka for my painting, but you can use whatever kind of painting medium you like. Okay, you can also airbrush on Isomalt, you can pipe on Isomalt, you can hand paint it with gel colors. Gel colors are okay then to be painted on top, they just can't be mixed in. Okay, I'll move these guys out of the way. I'm letting that dry for a minute. Alright, and then I will carefully hold this up. It's still drying, but I'll carefully hold it up so that you can see the finished piece. And there we go. So you see how that really added a lot of aged kind of antiqueness onto the finished piece. Let's see if I can get it off with a paper towel here. There we go. Alright, and there we go. So you can see the peacock is kind of between the feet there, and it's cascading down, and then we have the top brooch on the top. We have the feet in kind of the tripod so that he sits nice and flat, and that is the perfect size to display on top of a small cake, or you can use it as like a centerpiece. You can use it with desserts or cupcakes kind of stacked around it. You have lots of different options, and then of course you can customize the colors, customize the center decoration like I said. There's really lots and lots of different options. I'm going to turn my camera back up and I'll show you the finished one. Hi again! So I'm going to hold this one back up so you can see when it's upright, how it just kind of cascades down. You have the 3 feet that's holding it all flat, and there we go. Ta-da!
So pretty.
Thank you. All right, so what did you guys think? You guys have any questions? Can you see using this for your Easter themes? And you can mix mediums too. So like we were talking about before, you would fill it with chocolate the same way. You can make a chocolate egg. How awesome would that be? Because you could make the feet even out of something like gum paste, so they're a little stronger. You could probably do modeling chocolate if you want, as long as nothing is too heavy and you really let them dry nice and solid before you attach them, if you want to keep it all chocolate, because that's always a good thing. But you can also use the egg mold for the like chocolate bombs. If you want to make Easter themed bombs, just remember to use the griddle to flatten them out a little bit so that they stick together, which you would use anyway, right? Because that's how you get them to stick together really nice. But with chocolate, remember that you turn it down. You don't have it at 200 degrees, you'll have it at like 100 degrees or so, or whatever the lowest setting is on your griddle to make them stick nicely together. All right. Awesome, awesome. Yay, I'm so glad that you guys like it. Fantastic. Well, yeah, if you have any other questions, leave them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. If you're watching the replay of this, you're welcome to message me, or if you think of questions later, everyone's always welcome to message me here on Facebook or on Instagram or any of my social media, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you guys have about working with Isomalt. And all of my past lives like this are on my YouTube channel too. So if you just came in late and you want to see the beginning, you're welcome to. It'll be live on my Facebook page, but sometimes it gets hard to find it. So all of the past ones are listed on my YouTube channel, which is just under my name, Sidney Galpern, and that will pop up, so you can watch all of the past ones too. So usually at the end of my live streams, I announce my next live stream because I do this every single month. But we actually have a little bit of a surprise for April's different live streams and Zoom workshops and things. We are going to be collaborating with another artist, which I am so excited about. We're going to be doing, I believe, a Playdate like this, as well as one of my Zoom workshops. We're going to be doing a collaborative project, and I'm really excited. I don't have all of the details yet, but I will have them very soon, so make sure. Yeah, there'll be a big announcement very, very soon about who it is. You guys might be able to guess, I've done a lot of collaborations with this artist before, and our mediums complement each other beautifully, so I'm very, very excited. Make sure to stay tuned for that because we're going to be announcing it very soon. But yeah, it's going to be really fun, and I cannot wait to show you guys what we are working on to show you in the live stream and in the Zoom. But I do have a couple other things coming up. So tomorrow I have a demonstration that's going to be on the Cake International Virtual Edition. So Cake International, based in the UK, has gone virtual this year, the big cake show over there. So I'm going to be in the chocolate group. They have a whole bunch of different groups for whatever you are interested in learning, and so you can check that out. That is going to be tomorrow, the 6th, it's 4 p.m. UK, which is 11 a.m. EST here in the US, and then of course depending on your time zone, that'll change, but 4 p.m. UK, 11 a.m. EST, I'm going to be showing this under the sea chocolate showpiece sculpture, and all of the different techniques that go along with it. So that is going to be tomorrow.
I think the replay will be available till May 1st.
Awesome. Okay, good. So if you can't tune in tomorrow, you'll be able to watch it until May 1st.
All of them.
And all of them, yeah. There's so many different demonstrators that are going to be showing different things, and you get it all. It's a really, really awesome event that they're putting on with all of these different things. So make sure that you go check that out. All the information is at cakeinternational.co.uk, so you can sign up there to check out all of the different mediums and instructors. And then speaking of chocolate, I have my next Zoom workshop is going to be about table tempering chocolate. So you can see we have this chocolate bar here. It's a little different than my last chocolate tempering workshop where we used the seeding method. For this one, we're actually going to be forming the cocoa butter crystals by hand using a marble slab. So, and we're also going to be working with cocoa butter and how to temper that and work with it too. So that one's going to be a Zoom workshop. You can sign up on my website, simicakes.com, and all of the information is there. And then I also have my brand new Isomalt workshop, so it's another Zoom workshop, and that one is going to be March 26th and 27th, and it is all about Isomalt bows. So we're going to be casting some bows, but mainly we're going to be pulling hand-sculpted bows and ribbons, doing the striping technique. I'm going to show you all of these and more of different ways that you can put together bows, and it's going to be a really, really good time. So my Zoom workshops you do have to sign up for because the seats are limited, and we have the accessory kit that goes along with them that you can get, or you can just use what you have and come and hang out with us and watch and learn, and yeah, it's going to be a really, really good time. All right. Is there any final questions that you guys have before I go?
Is everybody part of the torch team?
Awesome. Yeah, make sure that you join the torch team because in addition to our collaborative Playdates and Zooms that we're going to be doing next month, we have another super exciting exclusive torch team event that we're going to be having, and I will be announcing that soon as well. So make sure you're a part of my Simi torch team. The Simi torch team is a completely free Facebook group for everything Isomalt. So we talk about all things Isomalt, all things Simi, and if you search Simi torch team or send me a message, I can invite you and I will add you to the group. It's really, really fun. We have so many amazing artists of all skill levels, and we also do like challenges every month. We do deals, we do free gifts of the month just for being a member of this free group, and we're going to have soon starting the exclusive live streams and events, so make sure that you are joined for the announcement on that is coming very soon as well. All right. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys liked it. Remember, you can send me messages if you have any questions afterwards, or if you're watching the replay. Yeah, post your picture of the finished piece because I would absolutely love to see your inspiration or your interpretation of this egg project or anything Simi Isomalt. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. Look out for that announcement because it is coming very, very soon. That's what I'm going to work on right now, actually. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next live stream. I hope you guys have a great weekend and see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.